Welcome to this short presentation about Key Stage 3 Reading, a research overview and the strategies that you can use to support your child at home in order to read regularly and for enjoyment. At St Joseph's College, everything we do is rooted in evidence-based research. The evidence that you'll hear about today has been taken from a Department for Education research paper, which explored the evidence they could find on reading for pleasure. The two big takeaways were, firstly, that there is a positive relationship between reading frequency, reading enjoyment and attainment. So those children who are reading regularly are inevitably likely to do better when it comes to grades, accessing materials to do with exams and other work in school. Additionally, reading for pleasure is an activity that has emotional and social consequences, so their understanding becomes far greater of the world around them, and this can help them in their own emotional regulation and also understanding the social situations that they find themselves in. In school, we can regularly be heard talking about the benefits of reading with our students. There are a number of reasons why reading is beneficial for our young people. And one of the things that we use to track the reading habits and also the reading abilities of our young people is the Accelerated Reader programme. You may have heard your children talking about this at home, or you may have seen them using it, accessing some of the quizzing facilities from home too. So this is just one method that we use, that we've focused a lot of our attention on over the last term and a half, with a view to encouraging more reading for pleasure. So from our perspective, although we are talking about it a lot in school, what we are asking them to do is to read a little bit more at home. And so a big purpose of this presentation is about offering different strategies and opportunities to facilitate reading at home and to do that successfully. So coming back to the benefits of reading, you can see a number of benefits that have been included on the screen, such as how that might improve general reading ability, but also the knock-on effect that that has on writing ability. That comes from things like the breadth of vocabulary, the improved general knowledge that takes place. You would expect to see an improved text comprehension and improved grammar skills on a kind of wider level. Young people who read more have a better understanding of other cultures. They have a greater insight into wider society, the reason that humans behave the way that they do, and also decision making. And I suppose more importantly, what we want them to have is self-confidence as a reader to be able to tackle a whole range of texts independently and in school. Strategies to improve independent reading is really the focus of the presentation. So what we've found from the research is that young people who have access to resources, particularly books of their own, that they can have and access at their will, has a significant impact on children's attainment. We also know that there is a positive relationship between the estimated number of books in the home and attainment. So what our children see in the environment around them. Are there lots of books around? Are they used to seeing books? Is it something that they could expect to see a parent or somebody in the family doing regularly? It is always a kind of big drive of independent reading for young people. But you can see some of the strategies that I'm going to talk about today, and each of these I'll delve into in a little bit more detail and hopefully offer some practical strategies that you could think about incorporating at home, especially if your child is a reluctant reader. So firstly, the importance of choice, and something that I always talk to the students that I teach about being the kind of number one factor really when they're thinking about what to read. They need to be able to read something that appeals to them in some way. We all know that we don't have any desire to sit and engage with something that doesn't interest us. So remember that it doesn't have to be fiction. So even if that's something that you or others enjoy in the home, be open to the fact that perhaps it might be something different for them. And that might include being willing to start small. So magazines, newspapers, articles, that's still reading, especially if you've got a reluctant reader those shorter forms sometimes can be a really good way to start things off. I think it's always useful to seek out recommendations. I actively encourage our students at St Joseph's College to speak with our librarian, and also not just their English teachers, but other staff around the school who are also interested in literature and would be happy to talk to them about things that they might enjoy. And the other thing you can do is look at previous trends. So if your child has become a reluctant reader, but perhaps wasn't always a reluctant reader, look at what they've enjoyed in the past and talk to them about what they've enjoyed in the past. And perhaps that might provide some insight about where you could go next. Exploring together the different literature that's out there can be a really good way of bringing in that element of choice. Literacy targeted rewards might be a strategy that you want to undertake, but I do just want to explain that the evidence base for this is quite mixed. So it can be effective, but might not necessarily be effective with every young person. But the idea is, or certainly there is some evidence that's been found to suggest that rewards linked to the desired behaviour, so in this case, the desired behaviour is to read regularly for enjoyment and independently, is if we can kind of promote that through the rewards, then you are creating a cycle that will positively influence reading. So in terms of rewards, instead of saying, well, if we do some reading now, then you can have an hour on the Xbox later. If we could focus more on the idea of, well, if we can read this book, or if we can focus on reading X number of books, then a reward might be a set of book vouchers, for example, where they can choose the next selection of books. It could be the opportunity to select their own magazine based on their interests. It could be a literacy-based activity or trip, but something really that's designed to enhance that reading experience. So again, not one that will work for everybody, but something that might be worth considering for your child. Reading together, I think, is something that often when I speak with parents, they feel this is something that's been left behind really once their children transition from primary school to secondary school. But I would argue that you are never too old to be read to. And the important factor really is that the material is age appropriate. And again, coming back to that most important factor, that it's material that they find interesting. If you've got a young person who's reluctant to read, share the reading. That can be a good starting strategy. So taking it in turns, that means that they have the opportunity to have a regular break. It gives them the opportunity to have those sections chunked into smaller parts, so it feels a little bit less overwhelming. And perhaps most importantly, they get the opportunity to have that fluency modelled for them when they hear you reading. So absolutely read to them and engage in that together. By sharing it. Reading the same book could be another strategy that you use. So buying the same book if you've got shared interests. So could be an autobiography of somebody that you both kind of admire. It could be a fiction book that you both want to read. Read the same book and have those conversations throughout. So you might try and keep pace with one another and have conversations about what you've read. You could also encourage each other to make predictions about what might happen next. Lastly, I think engaging positively through curiosity. So be curious about what they are reading or what they want to read, asking questions, giving them the opportunity to share and talk to you about it is probably one of the most vital factors. Just to say a little bit more about the importance of talking about it. Comprehension, or asking them about what they've read and kind of encouraging them to verbalise it, have opinions, form their inferences and discuss them can be really positive in terms of improving their reading ability, but also getting them excited about what they're reading. So you can see there's some generic questions on the slide here that could be applied to most books. So things like, what's happened so far? What do you think might happen next? And can you tell me what makes you think that? Is it like anything else that you've read? And if so, what are the similarities or what are the differences? So all these kinds of questions just kind of open up that channel of conversation and encourage them to think about what they've read and make judgments. You could also ask them to rate and review what they've read. It might be that you've got a younger sibling, so it would be kind of a way of encouraging them to also engage. They could explain what's good about it, what's bad about it. And again, it's more of a reflective activity, really, to encourage them to think a little bit more deeply about what it is that they've read. You could also look at the reviews and talk about what other people have said about it, see if there's any kind of shared opinions or if there's any specific differences. And lastly, when we think about read it before you watch it, or that's a phrase that I certainly use an awful lot with the students that I teach. Obviously, you will find that there are lots of adaptations out there, and now that we've got such good access to streaming services, there are plenty of television shows and films that explore or have adapted versions of books. So where you notice that your young person's showing some interest in watching something and you know that there is a book, then encourage them to read it before they watch it. And then again, you've got the opportunity to talk about how is it different? How have they brought this to life? And is this particular thing what you expected when you read it? Or is it a bit different to the way that you'd envisioned it? And it just encourages us to think about how our imagination forges images and to, again, have that opportunity to enjoy it together and to talk about it. If you are trying to encourage your child to read more, it might be worth thinking about creating a dedicated reading space, part of the home where they can go that's conducive to the enjoyment of reading. And I'd just encourage you to think about certain factors that really will help them in terms of concentration and allowing them to kind of switch off and tune into the book. So looking at things like, is it a quiet space? So some young people might just enjoy reading in their bedrooms, or it might be a case of we can have a quiet area of the house. Somewhere that's quite comfortable is usually favourable as well, because we encourage it to be a relaxing activity, and so comfort is absolutely a part of that too. If we are talking about a kind of more accessible area of the home, then think about whether it's likely to be free from interruptions or disturbances at that time. Even simple things like not switching the washing machine on and keeping noise to a minimum can really help with concentration. And it also helps to create the right atmosphere. Some people even like to think about creating a reading fort or a space together. You can use things like blankets, cushions, other things, even fairy lights that you have at home, just to, again, make it more of an inviting space for them to want to go into. Understandably, as parents, often we have concerns about the engagement our children have with technology, how often they're using their phones or their tablets or other devices. And of course, that's something that needs to be monitored and regulated. But there is also a case for embracing technology. And just to reiterate, really, that reading on tablets or Kindles, those kinds of digital methods that are specifically designed for reading, are absolutely fine. There's very little difference, really, from that and reading a book. Even I think if lots of us, so like me, traditionally you enjoy reading an actual paper book, it might be that their preference is something different. So just being open to that and giving them those opportunities where you can, I think is fine. Not forgetting that we've got the quiz feature on Accelerated Reader. This is already part of home learning. So in English at the moment, we set the Accelerated Reader home learning once a fortnight, which is really more of a reminder that regular reading should be taking place. But the quiz feature is something that certainly you could look at together, and it might be, again, another way to encourage them to talk to you about what they've read and how they know the answers to those questions. Also, using the internet to look for recommendations or reviews that might inspire reading choices is really beneficial. There's lots of information out there, and it is probably the most or the easiest way to access quick information, and probably quite trustworthy if we're looking in the right places. Finally, and perhaps it feels like an obvious one, but I think always worth just pointing out, opportunities to celebrate success, take them. Young people typically will always respond better to positivity when they feel like they're doing well, or when they feel like that they're having a bit of a fuss made over them. And that's something we do at school. So in recent months, we've really kind of put a lot more emphasis on celebrating reading through rewards, such as achievement points. So we offer achievement points for every completed quiz that takes place on Accelerated Reader. We provide certificates. So some of our young people have achieved the Word Millionaire certificates based on the amount of literature that they've consumed over time. Or even Word Multimillionaire, which is incredible. We offer other prizes as well, or other opportunities, again, and we're kind of trying to base them more on celebrating their engagement with literature. So we are offering, for example, a breakfast in the library towards the end of the year for those students who have kind of shown the most interest in reading through Accelerated Reader, demonstrating that they're reading regularly, quizzing regularly. So yeah, absolutely, we make a fuss of it at school. And at home, of course, celebrations are just as important, but also inevitably they'll look a little different from one house to the next. So of course, as I've mentioned, verbal praise is always a good place to start. But there is a feature on Accelerated Reader where you can look at the progress that you are making. So I always think it's worth asking your child to log in, and that's something that you could look at together. So they will be able to show you their word count so far. And often it's more impressive than we're expecting. So it's really well worth a look, because it's a good opportunity to celebrate them and what they've achieved. Keep checking in with them and celebrating those milestones, just to make sure really that they, that they are seen, that they feel recognised, that they're making the effort, because we're certainly asking them to kind of up that at the moment too. As always, if you've got any questions or queries, then please do just get in touch with us. But hopefully you've found some use in the strategies that we've offered you today. Please feel free to look back over this as and when you need to. And look for yourselves at the different information that's out there as well. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. Please feel free to come back to it as and when you might find it useful to revisit some of these strategies.